what he expresses in his work is something that goes deep into the African American experience. And I respect him for becoming what he is and yet not compromising his roots and where he came from.
His sense of honor, his love of people, his interest in children, his decency alone would make him someone that a community would want to celebrate and whose memory we would want to perpetuate.
When I see Philip as the keeper of the gate, I think of him as a person who has kept this tradition alive. He has given us a legacy as a community, and also he has trained young men to follow in his footsteps.
Working with him, learning from him about all the processes, the teaching process. It's just like being with your own father, with working with Mr. Simmons. Matter of fact, he's just like a father to everybody.
How do people feel about imagery that they can see and touch and interact with? The same kind of experience, what they're having is an experience of being one-on-one with a work of art.
Keeper of the Gate, the life and works of Philip Simmons.
How did practical objects of iron become renowned as delicate works of beauty? And where did this artwork come from, and who created it? Good evening, everyone. I'm News 4's Byron Brown in front of the Visitor Center's gate in Charleston, an iron gate crafted only for decoration. Its creator, Philip Simmons, started as a simple blacksmith in the early 1920s at a little shop just around the corner from here. But how did this man go from shoeing horses and making usable pieces of ironworks to creating works of art on display throughout the country, including an exhibition for the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C.? It's a rich career that spanned over 60 years, and this is his remarkable story.
Keeper of the Gate will continue.
Just 3 generations removed from slavery, Philip Simmons was born in 1912 on Daniel Island, across the Cooper River from Charleston. Here he spent his boyhood working on his grandparents' farm, acquiring the rural values of hard work and appreciation for the land and all of God's creations.
Philip takes a great deal of pride in the things that God has created, and he remains dedicated to God, and this is the way that he expresses that dedication.
This work is a lost art. It comes from a lost age, from a time we will not see again, and yet here it is, suddenly right in front of them, made yesterday by a man who's still alive. I mean, that has the quality of being nearly miraculous.
Philip's early years in a rural all-black community would be the basis for a life concerned with family values, a strong work ethic, and an understanding of his African roots. This would serve him well and become apparent in his later creations.
Philip has crystallized, I think, many of the African customs. In fact, at our museum not too long ago, when one of his pieces was on display, an African came in and said, "Oh, that's very much like our culture."
But school was to be more important than eking out a minimum existence on the farm. And at the age of 8, Philip was sent to attend school and to make his home in Charleston. Philip Simmons attended school here at Buse Academy, but it was his move to Charleston that meshed his African roots with the Charleston community, a community he would leave so much to.
Philip always has seen himself as a Charlestonian, and being a Charlestonian rates very high. The fact that he's obviously a black person is not remarkable to him. No, that's he can't do anything about that, and he's happy and secure in that experience. That he has been respected for his abilities across both black and white communities has allowed him to fuse the notion of Charleston as not a black city and a white city, not two communities, but one community.
In fact, Philip would later return to this school as a guest lecturer and to create this gateway for the children to pass through on their way to adulthood.
He is, for all of us, but young people especially, such a wonderful example of what hard work and dedication and commitment and a strong work ethic can accomplish.
Philip's hard work's gonna shine everywhere you see it. Philip's hard work's gonna shine everywhere you see it. Philip's hard work's gonna shine. Everywhere you see it, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
There was no shortage of role models for an ambitious black youngster in Charleston in 1925. After school, kids would stop into the tradesmen's shops looking for part-time work and trying to decide what type of job they might like. But Philip already knew. He was attracted to the blacksmith shops naturally because of the hustle and bustle, loud noises and flying sparks which surrounded the smithies.
I love action, and a lot of action was going on in the blacksmith shop there. Turning the forge and the fire and the spark flying, and the horses, trying to put shoes on a horse, and they kicking up, you got to put the twist on the horse, and the old man, Peter Simmons, would put the twist on, so you hold this, and I love action. I think that's how come I got in the blacksmith shop.
Philip began working part-time at the local blacksmith shop of Peter Simmons, no relation. Former slave Peter Simmons was well known in town as a master blacksmith with a thriving business. He was a great role model for young boys.
If we think our times are bad now, we only have to think about what it was like to live under slavery. Peter Simmons was someone who lived in that way, and yet had made a life for himself, had developed a reputation as a skillful artisan, as a person of some modest fame. And Philip could look at that and say, he had a tough row to hoe, and look what he made of himself. If I can do nothing more than just do what he did, I'll be fine.
In the days of the horse and wagon, the blacksmiths were like the auto mechanic of today. They kept the horse shod and fixed the metal strips that held the wagon together. But shortly after embarking on his new craft, Philip saw his profession changing.
But the old man, he had a vision. He called me one day and he said, Philip, don't you worry with those guys telling you about the blacksmith going to become a lost art. It's always going to be something for the blacksmith to do. And he said, always.
And Peter Simmons did more ornamental pieces than most blacksmiths. So under his training, Philip not only learned skills that would keep him in business long after the cars replaced the horse and buggy, he also discovered his own hidden talent.
Real Philip, the one that we know, emerged from this very basic thing into the artisan that he developed into because of what was inside Philip.
I think that Philip emerged as an artist out of a need to create, but also a need to provide for his family, and he made that transition from a blacksmith to a craftsman, and he has developed his art. So I think that is very significant because there aren't that many people who can make that transition, and I think that further shows his genius.
When we return, we'll take a closer look at the work of Philip Simmons and talk with the people who also agree that this remarkable man is truly an artist of our time.
Keeper of the Gate will continue.
As the traditional work of the blacksmith started to vanish, Philip began to look for work in other areas. It started with the repairing of ornamental ironwork and the fabricating of some small decorative pieces. But it was here in Stoll's Alley where his work would be noticed. The house here at number 9 draws much attention as one of the few pre-Revolutionary War architecture still standing. And it was here, after making his fan gate, that Philip began to be known for decorative ironworks. And this well-viewed walkway gate served as a billboard for his shop. In the late 1930s, the historic Charleston Foundation established rigorous codes to preserve the city's venerable buildings and mandated the use of authentic materials. This created a resurgence of requests for ornamental ironwork, and Philip Simmons stood ready to satisfy this demand.
In those days, as today, Philip Simmons was renowned as the last practitioner of Charleston's historic decorative wrought iron tradition.
During the same time Philip was getting started in his new career, he married and had 3 children in just 4 years. But when his wife died suddenly, Philip was left alone to do the best he could.
To have been left with young children at an early age like that, I thought it was quite a trying experience for a young man. But he has stuck with his family all through the years.
Basically, he devoted himself to his children, and he figured that he had to be the best artisan he could be because he had 3 children to support. And as he was essentially a bachelor for most of his life, he could really focus in on being a skilled artisan.
Perhaps one of Philip's best-known gates is the Snake Gate at 329 East Bay Street, as this piece was a perfect example of how Philip could make his work seem to come alive.
So in Philip's work, it is not just that steel that you see or that wrought iron that you see. It is that the movement and the shapes of it and the curvatures that he uses makes his gates look very much as if they are living objects rather than static pieces of wrought iron.
And this impressive rattlesnake at the Gatson House and the delicate profile egret made for the William Rhett House are the first examples of animal sculptures which helped Philip to establish his own indelible mark on the local decorative ironworks tradition of Charleston.
Philip Simmons' work is around us and will always be a part of the city's beauties. But what he did was incorporate what Charleston and the Low Country is all about in his works.
But Philip needed Charleston as much as Charleston needed Philip, for only a city drenched in history and tradition could provide the backdrop for decorative iron gates and give Philip a canvas to create his fine works of art. And Philip was true to his city and his customers.
First find out if the client is a Charlestonian or not. If the person is from Charleston, is a native, that they can pay for their contract when the job is done. People who are not Charlestonians have to pay up front.
You satisfy the customer, and the customer will do the advertising. You don't have to go to the newspaper, the magazine, or come to you, the radio station, and say, advertise my business. Let the customer advertise your business.
Philip Simmons' work has been captured in black and white film by photographer Claire Green.
I was commissioned by the Philip Simmons Foundation to document all of Philip's work in Charleston. Looking at it, I wanted to be able to express what Philip was feeling when he did that work.
Drew it that size and gave it just like that to Mr. Simmons, and I asked him to copy it identically, and he did a masterful job.
But even though we might just do simple and incomplete sketches, we could rely on him to finish them in the proper manner.
He's just proud of the job when it's done, and the customer likes the work. He goes on to another job.
And it's amazing, tourists just come and are enthralled by them and stop and stare at all the gates and to try to take pictures, and I think take them home and hope that some miracle they might be able to find somebody who could do something like them.
Then I said to him, my gracious, you came so late, I can't afford such a gate now. I would have to save the money to pay you. So he said, you waited for me, therefore I will wait for you.
Would work out the detail and take the drawings to a shop where he would fabricate the ornamental ironwork, and the products would be second to none.
Well, there's a big shoes to fill now. But I don't know if I can fill it, but I'm gonna do my best.
With over 200 gates in his collection, the gate Philip completed in 1987 is perhaps one of the best examples of his own creation. It stands in a specially constructed area in South Carolina's State Museum in Columbia.
I'm excited about getting a piece in the State Museum. I'm just excited, to see the piece as though, I'm making it for myself.
Within the elegant lines of what is simply called the Philip Simmons Gate, Philip has woven the shapes and silhouettes found in his native South Carolina home. The egret, the magnolia leaf, and of course the palmetto tree, the state's official tree.
The gate is a device to close your property from strangers or people you don't want to come in, but if it's as fancy as he makes it, it is also a sculpture, and it will stand in an art gallery as sculpture.
All of his work was created using only traditional blacksmith tools and working from this simple shop, which has remained almost unchanged for over 125 years. Now, when we return, we will take a personal view of a man that has so influenced his community and has left the world a better place than the one in which he found.
Keeper of the Gates, will continue.
In January of 1994, the state bestowed upon Philip Simmons its highest honor. He was inducted into the South Carolina Hall of Fame.
Golly, he was so proud, and yet he was so modest. And I thought that was quite remarkable. I have a feeling that most people who would be put into the Hall of Fame would become, well, a little overbearing, and Philip, of course, doesn't have an ounce of that in his body.
But perhaps a greater tribute is the building of a commemorative garden to display Philip's work for future generations.
So much of Philip's works now are scattered through the city. We want this place to be the place that's Philip's garden, where his ironwork and his craft can be recognized in a place that's his.
In the African culture, the Dibius, or visionaries, are the purveyors of great knowledge and guardians of tradition. These artists fashion objects infused with inventiveness and dignity that tell the history of the tribe. Just as these individuals are greatly revered in African culture, Philip Simmons has continued in this tradition, not only creating a tangible record of the past, but by contributing to future generations, by setting a lifelong example to everyone in this community. You know, often the best way to get to know someone is to talk with them and let them do most of the talking. So with our remaining time, we invite you to Philip Simmons' front porch to just sit and listen a while.
That's why the fish gate is so important, and I would stress that to you, that the fish gate was made in Washington, D.C., and the front of the Lincoln Memorial on the lawn with only about 4 or 5 pieces equipment. And I would say that fish gate means a lot to me, because it demonstrates my ability at fish gate, because I had less equipment to work with. All those other things was made here in Charleston. I had the whole shop to work with. But at the Lincoln Memorial, I only had a few pieces. I took the forge and the fire along with me and work on the lawn. And going up there and doing the same old thing they've been seeing for years, and the Western movies and towns and on the plantation, see the blacksmith working, and I didn't thought things would come out, material out like that, but that's what really happened. And all of the whole thing that I have done up there, it began from just hard working. A boy wants to work to earn $1.
Thanks for the company, and we hope that you enjoyed the show. I'm News 4's Byron Brown.
When I see a customer come in the door, I know my children will be fed, my family, my bills are going to be paid. Please remember that, young people, especially all students. You may go into business sometime of your own, be self-employed. Remember, the customer is your boss. The customer is not an agitator when he comes to you. The customer comes to you with their concern, and you should be a concern about the customer. And I want to close with these words. The customer pays the bill, feed the children, send the children to school. The customer is important. Me O'Reilly is one of the customers. And what you have heard, he is a happy customer. And a customer come and you smile. And when they go, they're going to smile. Thank you.
Keeper of the Gate, the life and works of Philip Simmons.